Do you need the terminal to use Linux? It's probably one of the main things that gives Linux the reputation of being a nerdy operating system. For some, the terminal is overwhelming. Some assume it's not for them because they're not a programmer, and others just don't want to have to learn a new skill. But is it required? For my first month on the Linux desktop, I tried to avoid the terminal as much as possible by using Fedora, a distribution that describes itself as easy to use. But is the GUI easier than using the terminal? In this video, we're going to be looking at my bash history file, a file that logs every command I've ever run on my terminal, and we're going to find out how badly I failed at my own challenge, and why I don't mind that I did. Before we look through my history, I've got to give a little bit of a background. I actually like the terminal, so sometimes I use it when it's not required. Sudo shutdown now. I could have just clicked this and then clicked this and then... So we can get an accurate measurement of what terminal commands are required, I'm going to be challenging myself to complete some terminal tasks with the GUI, as a little redemption arc. So without further ado, let's take a look at my terminal history. Usually I just type cat bash history into the terminal and log the output of the file. But since we're not using the terminal, I'm finding the file the GUI way. I think there's only one glaringly obvious issue with my Linux distro that requires the terminal, which we'll get to, but all the other commands have pretty simple ways to replicate them without terminal usage. I'm going to ignore the sections where I installed KDE and Sway, because I was just demonstrating to someone how you could install other desktops and completely forgot I was supposed to be challenging myself. Besides, I'm pretty confident in saying that if you're running multiple desktops on one machine, that kind of breaks us out of the GNOME ecosystem, which I base this challenge around. Taking a look at my history, you'll find some things that are pretty easy to install with the software manager. For some reason, I decided to install OBS via the terminal. I could just do it here. It's right there. One thing I found pretty cool is that you can actually install third-party repositories like RPM Fusion through the GUI. You just download the RPM off their website and you install it like a normal package. And just like that, you have RPM Fusion in the software store. As I was using GNOME, I wanted my legacy applications to match the rest of the operating system, so I used the ADW GTK3 theme. It comes with a simple command to actually install it from the terminal, but there is also a manual way to do it. We extract it, we get the folder, local share themes. Unable to find, okay, local share, new folder, themes, and then we move both of those in. I don't think you could convince me that the manual way is better than just running the one terminal command, but I mean, I have to do it anyway. Some tools for game optimization, like GameScope, require the CLI to run. I could have technically bypassed using the terminal here by experimenting with the launch commands in Steam, but on the GameScope repo it states that if you want a detailed list, you have to run the terminal help command. And to be fair to them, it is very detailed and has a lot more options than the regular wiki does. Even though GameScope's a bit more technical though, you can still get away without using the command line for it. I could have worked around it with something like Steam Tinker Launch, which gives the GUI to customize GameScope, as well as other CLI gaming tools like MangoHUD, and even some modding tools. Okay, now we get to the last item on the terminal list, which is certainly not the least, which were the VA API issues I was having. If you want to hear more about it, you can watch the last video where I had to set everything up, but I don't think I would be able to do this without the terminal, if I'm honest. Some people might argue that Fedora is a bad pick for me, which I understand, especially when there are distros geared toward content creation, like Nobara, for example. The only issue I have with that, though, is that installing another distro doesn't guarantee the seamless experience I've had with Fedora other than VA API. It just guarantees that I wouldn't have to worry about VA API. And to be honest, using a mainstream distro like Fedora does give me a bit more confidence, so I'm happy to stick with it. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I ran in the terminal, and I was able to replicate a lot with the GUI as well. If you got a keen eye, you may have noticed that I glossed over a few things, and that's because there were a few failed experiments, but overall I think I did okay. I know I definitely could have done better, maybe with a different distro, or if I deleted the terminal app off my computer and forced myself to use the GUI, but at the end of the day I feel like no matter what your starting point is, it's not always in your distro's control whether you're going to be using the terminal or not. There's just too many different combinations of software in Linux, and most people find that describing the terminal way to do something is easier than describing multiple GUI ways to do the same thing. This makes sense when you think about how many different UIs there are to choose from, but there's only one terminal interface. This doesn't mean that you have to use the terminal yourself though. For example, to automatically mount my second hard drive, I ended up using GNOME disks to change the settings, but not every desktop environment comes with GNOME disks, whereas pretty much every Linux distro has an fstab file that you change. I think the most interesting thing about this experiment though is that I've kind of convinced myself that I wouldn't want to avoid the terminal. For me and many others, the terminal is a perfect way to interface with the operating system. While some commands will take a while to learn, once you know them, it feels great to be able to enter in a command and see the output reflected almost immediately. I've kind of been itching to get this challenge out the way so I can tinker with my operating system a little bit more. I want to check out Neri and maybe create my own panels in QuickShell. So yeah, we'll see how far down the rabbit hole I go. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, the usual engagement is greatly appreciated. I'd love to hit 500 subs. That'd be pretty cool. And yeah, bye.